Okay, everybody. Hello, this is Mitch Weisberg. I'm here for Mind Shifting Monday with Mitch. And today we're going to talk about why good advice often escalates into conflict. My guess is that that doesn't happen to you. It probably only happens to me. But sometimes I see somebody doing something. I know exactly what they should do. I have great advice to give them. I offer them my advice and only to help them out, right? Not to criticize them. I just want to do something good for them, and then it blows up in my face. So why does that happen? We all have moments where we see somebody struggling, right? A coworker, a student, a spouse, maybe child, and we know exactly what to say, what to do to fix their problem. So we offer them our advice and we tell them what to do, and what happens? They get defensive, right? They argue, they shut down, and suddenly we're in conflict. And as I was thinking about this, is like it happened to me this weekend. My wife and I were at a dance practice party, and they were playing the waltz. And there's this one routine where it's about five or six different things. You do a twinkle, you do a chasse, you rotate around, you do a backwards leg lock, and then you turn around again and you move off in another direction. And in the middle of it, she took one extra step. And as the person who's leading, when your partner isn't following, it kind of throws you off. So in the with the best of intent, I said, "Okay, you took one extra step." And her response was, "I don't need advice from you. Just figure out what to do and do it and stop giving me advice." And after 40 years of marriage, it still took me back because, again, my advice was just like, "Hey, something, we're trying to get this right." So my guess is things like that happen sometimes to you also, or in reverse. So, if you were to think about the last time somebody told you what to do, not asked, but told you, you took an extra step, you didn't do this right. Um, what would be one or two words that described how you felt? And you can put them in the chat. I can see the chat, and I know what it is with me. Um, if I am doing the dishes and I walk out of the room and start watching TV or something, and somebody, and I won't name any names, but somebody says you didn't finish the dishes, it's not like I'm taking that like, "Oh yeah, you're right. I'm so excited that you told me I'm going to do the dishes." My first reaction is to get upset. And it probably happens to all of us, right? Whether you shared something, whether you said something back to them, or whether you just thought it, your words or your thoughts were something like, "I'm annoyed," or you shut down, or you get defensive, or you get rebellious. And what we're going to do today is we're going to unpack exactly why that happens. We'll look at the brain science, the neuroscience of telling versus asking, why our own reactions make the conflict worse, and what 60 years of research says that we could do to better move things forward. So to understand, why advice sometimes backwards, we have to look at, the survival brain, the resourceful brain, and the trap. Okay. When we tell people what to do, what happens is that their brain automatically reads that as, "This person is judging me." That person reads it as a threat. It threatens their autonomy and their independence. The moment the brain perceives a threat, our fast, automatic survivor brain, our limbic system takes over. And that's what triggers our fight, flight, or freeze instincts. When any of us, when somebody is in their survival brain, they literally lose access to their resourceful parts of the brain. They lose access to their prefrontal cortex. And that prefrontal cortex is where critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, executive function, that's where all of that exists. because they don't have access to that, to their resourceful parts of the brain, they're biologically incapable of absorbing your good advice because they're locked in survival mode. They're locked into, how do I combat this threat? Do I freeze? Do I fight back? Do I run away? And in fact, what they're looking to hear is only confirmation that they're right, you're threatening them. They're right, what they did was good, and you're wrong. Now, here's where real conflict begins, because we want to influence or advise others because we care or is because we need a specific outcome. But when they push back, despite our intentions, what is it that we do? Well, just imagine, you give somebody a good piece of advice. They say, I'm not going to take information from you. And what's your reaction? Okay. You react. When their survival brain fights back, it triggers our mirror neurons, it triggers our survival brain. And now we're both operating out of fight, flight, or freeze. And it becomes a limbic to limbic battle. We start using facts or logic or authority or rewards or punishments, okay, to force them or to get them to agree with us. And that use of logic or rewards or punishments only makes them double down. We get angry because our help is being rejected. Well, our anger further threatens them. Okay. And that cycle of conflict is not just locked in, but it escalates. So, you know, I'm curious, maybe you can put something in the chat. Have you ever caught yourself giving advice, realized mid sentence that the other person was getting defensive, and yet you just kept arguing your point anyway? Let me know in the chat, because this is something that I did, because again, going back to that dance this weekend, after she said, "I'm not taking advice from you," my response was, "Well, don't you want to get the step right?" And that was not the right thing to say. And we do this because our survivor brain convinces us that if we just explain it one more time, maybe if we explain it with different words, maybe if we explain it louder, okay, they're going to finally understand. And what I found in 40 years of marriage, 41 years of marriage, that doesn't really work. So then the question is, how do we break this cycle? Now, there's research since like the 1960s, 1970s on how do you handle these situations. And two particularly powerful frameworks that evolved are motivational interviewing and nonviolent communications. Both frameworks rely on the same fundamental shift: moving from telling to asking, moving from demands to curiosity based requests. And both of them are dived into in pretty great detail in the mind shifting conflict and collaboration book. Motivational interviewing was developed to help people overcome resistance to change. It teaches us that people are far more likely to follow through on a solution if they author it themselves. So, motivational interviewing, or MI, relies on a few core steps. The first thing involves you. If you want to use motivational interviewing with another person, you yourself have to adopt an attitude of curiosity. You have to be in resourceful brain, and you have to be able to stay in resourceful brain. If you're curious about what they're really interested in or what's driving them, not from the standpoint of, I want to hear it so that I can argue with it, but I want to hear it because I want to understand it and figure out how we can work together. So if you're really curious, the next thing is for you to ask open-ended questions, not like, why did you do that, which causes defensiveness. Things like, what would you like to happen? What would make this fun? Um, you know, is this, are you getting the results that you want? Okay, but open-ended questions that invite them to open up, um, said from a mindset of curiosity, really does establish a connection. and then using reflective listening. Repeat back their concerns to them so that they feel heard, and then affirming their ability, acknowledge their strength to lower their defenses. So that's really four steps: adopting an attitude of curiosity, asking open ended questions, use reflective listening, and then affirming their ability. And I will say, there's a QR code here on the screen. I'm going to be going through these and other techniques in the masterclass, which is Wednesday. Today's Monday, so it's just in 2 days. That masterclass, it's going to be closed out at about 35 people. We currently have, I think, 29 who are registered for it. So if you're interested in really exploring these, especially regarding education, because it's going to focus on education, consider coming or registering for the masterclass. Anyhow, I was going through. There's really two different frameworks that have emerged. One is motivational interviewing, and a second one is nonviolent communication, or NVC. Nonviolent communication gives us a structured way to make requests without sounding like we're giving orders. Now, nonviolent communication also has four steps. First is what they call observation, stating the facts neutrally without judgment. Something like, I noticed the garbage is full, instead of, you never take out the garbage. And you can just hear the dripping judgment in that second statement, right? You never take out the garbage. Maybe true, probably is an exaggeration. I noticed the garbage is full is just a statement, not a judgment. Second part, the expressing your emotion or your feeling. Feeling is the second part. How do you feel about this? Oh, I feel overwhelmed. I feel upset. And again, with feeling, it's important that the person didn't make you have a certain feeling, because then you're surrendering your own autonomy. It's just how you feel. So I notice the garbage is full. And when I notice the garbage is full, sometimes I feel overwhelmed or sometimes I feel upset. And then need, connect the feeling to something that you need. Okay. So in this case, um, because I need us to share in our shared space. I need us to both take on tasks, in order to live together. So that's a general need. And then the fourth part of nonviolent communications is to make a request, because too often we end with, I need this, and then the person doesn't exactly know what to do. But the request is a specific thing for the person to do at basically at this moment or really soon. So a clear, actionable question might be, would you be willing to take it out? Now, a request opens the conversation, a demand would shut it down. So I need you to take out the garbage would be a statement, which is kind of a request, okay, but it closes off. Would you be willing to take it out? Allows the person some agency, which is the better format of that. So nonviolent communication, four steps. State and state what you're observing, which is facts based, not judgment based. How you feel, expressing your emotion. Third, what your general need is, connecting a feeling to a need. And then fourth, a specific request. And so those two can, those two can be connected together, the motivational interviewing and the nonviolent communication, because in motivational interviewing, you're asking the questions to find out what the person values and what they'd be willing to do. And in nonviolent communication, you're basically summing up the situation and you're making a very specific request, confirming that the person is willing to take action. So let's take a look at how this research works in practice with three real examples from educators who have taken mind shifting courses. So here's one example. One teacher had a very talented student, drum set player, who wasn't practicing. The teacher needed to give the part to someone else. Now, the survivor brain reaction would be to tell the student, you aren't practicing, so I'm taking your part away. Instead, the teacher used nonviolent communication. She started with the student's strengths. You're one of the strongest musicians in the room. You pick up things fast. She stated the observation neutrally. I noticed you haven't been practicing. Because she didn't attack, the students stayed in their resourceful brain and admitted that they were overwhelmed with commitments outside of school, and that led to a peaceful mutual agreement rather than a tearful fight. So you see the difference, starting with one of the students' strengths, stating the fact, and then that led to a conversation rather than a fight. Or here's an example that came in a workplace, again from somebody who was taking the a mind shifting course. A highly capable employee was resisting new project management software. They preferred to use their old spreadsheets and calling the new tool just busy work. Instead of mandating compliance, which would have created a quiet rebellion, the manager used reflective listening. Hmm, it sounds like you value your deep work time and worry that this is just administrative friction, and then waited for a response. Said from a point of curiosity that does elicit a response. Then they developed what the discrepancy was. Your spreadsheet is fast for you, but the team is struggling because they can't see your updates in real time. How can we balance your need for speed with the team's need for visibility? The employee immediately shifted from defensive to collaborative, offering a way to automate their updates. So you see here again, instead of I want you to use the spreadsheet, you don't want to use the spreadsheet. So me versus you, it's like, oh, I see you have these strengths. Here's a need that we both have. How do we work together to solve these needs? And that's really one of the goals of motivational interviewing. And then another example from a participant in a course, a mother was dealing with her teenage daughter. Huh. That probably sounds familiar to a lot of us, right? The daughter wanted to drop her, uh, her friends group and just date one boy exclusively. Well, you can just imagine, right? If simply telling your daughter, no, you can't just date this one guy, you have to stay with your friends, like what would that have done? Okay. That would have just guaranteed a fight, right? Instead, the mom used strength based feedback. I admire your emotional maturity and how much heart you put into relationships. Then she shared her need. I feel anxious when I see you focusing all your energy on one person because I want you to have a broad support system. And she finished the request with, would you be willing to shift towards group dates for the next few months to keep things low stress? By asking instead of telling, she bypassed the teenager's survival brain and they negotiated a compromise peacefully. So you can see the difference between demanding and asking, but changing this habit takes practice, and it's really helpful to do this in a group. And so I have a free research here, or free resource here for you, um, called "Asking Not Telling." Um, since changing a habit takes practice, and it really helps to work it out with other people. We've created something called a conversation circle packet called asking instead of telling, and you can download it free from this QR code. I want to encourage you to download it and host a 45-minute discussion with some group. It could be with your family, it could be with people that you work with, it could be your friends, it could be a book group. Nobody needs to be an expert. The packet gives you everything in order to discuss how do you change the way you make requests for people, or how do you change the way you give advice for people. So let's see how this works. Um, the packet starts with an icebreaker. Okay, you start the meeting with some icebreaker. For example, there's one called "Good Advice Ignored." So you may ask your team, think of a time someone gave you advice that was probably right, but you ignored it anyhow. What made you resist? And then there's other possible icebreakers that you could start with. And then once you're through the icebreakers, you've got started. Then you go through a phase in the conversation circle where everybody starts to recognize what the situation is. And so you're going to spend 10 minutes discussing what happens inside our brains when people tell us what to do versus asking good questions, and what people's experiences have been when people have ordered them around, or when people have given them advice and they've reacted defensively. And then the second phase is understanding how to overcome that resistance. So you explore questions that bring everybody to talk about why it's easier when people ask us questions, and what are the types of questions that we could ask that make it easier for other people to follow our advice. And then in phase three is where you pair up and you get a chance to practice it. You think of a demand that you've recently made or advice you've given that isn't working, and you each get a chance to practice rephrasing it into curiosity based questions. So, this single 45, maybe 60-minute exercise gives your whole team or your whole family a shared vocabulary. It allows everyone to catch themselves before they make demands, and it saves your organization or your family from countless unnecessary conflicts. So, just to wrap up what we've covered, and just to wrap up what we covered, when we tell people what to do, we trigger their survival brains and we create resistance. When we ask genuine questions, we invite the other person's resourceful brain to start thinking and collaborating. It takes practice to suppress our urge to just give advice to people or to criticize people. But so many years of research proves that curiosity is far more effective than control. So if you want to try this out, I suggest you download the Asking Instead of Telling Conversation Guide, gather a group of people together, and start making the shift together. Thank you for joining me here on Mind Shifting Mondays with Mitch. I could stay on for a few minutes, or I'll check out the chat to answer any questions. I want everybody to have a great week. Maybe I'll see some of you in the masterclass on Wednesday. Otherwise, look forward to seeing you again next Monday on Mind Shifting Monday with Mitch. Have a good week.